At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
I'm doing everything I can. Now stop calling me Shirley.
The center has to be at least 3 times bigger than this.
All right, it's Sincerely Unqualified. I'm Kevin, that's Winnie, and today we have our 20th episode. Well, technically 20th, because we're going to count our top 10 episode in that, our pivot episode from the Lost Tapes.
That's fine. Yeah. We got out of the Lost Tapes, we're counting these, and it's the big 2-0. How does it feel?
Feels great, honestly. It feels awesome. And it's nice because we're taking a little pivot. We're going to pivot a little. You saw it in the title. We're going to be talking Jojo Rabbit and Death of Stalin. So I say that the movies that we've done, you know, they're pure comedies. Every comedy says something. That's not really a hot take at all. Like, the movies that we've done have said something. These just probably say a little more than the average.
Yeah, I think that these do their best in being comedies, but they're also so much more than that, because these, unlike the I Love You Mans and the This Is the Ends, they're based in truth. So for Jojo Rabbit, it's obviously World War II. Death of Stalin, it's right after World War II. And these are really just major historical events that are looked at through a completely different lens. And it's so cool to see, you know, these things being looked at in, you know, through the comedic lens, because I think that there's things that these movies do that only comedies can really handle, and only comedies can really take that view. Because when you're learning about these things, whether it be in history class or on like the BBC, you're watching World War II in color, something like that.
Big
you're
BBC
seeing
guy.
these great, exactly, you know, BBC. But you really just learn about these historical events as if they have no relevance to you. Almost you're looking at them through like this divide. There's no break of the fourth wall. You think of them as kind of these characters. It's hard to describe, but it's really like a grayed out version of history. So it's like you see the grayed out footage, you don't really feel connected to it. You feel like that's something completely separate from you. Yeah, I don't know if you agree.
I do, because it's so awful. When you see such awful things, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. But when you see it through a kind of funny lens that has a lot of heart and drama to it, and Jojo, I mean, it's a little more out there than Death of Stalin. The Death of Stalin kind of brings you in. It kind of puts you there with them. It'd be like, oh, these people, you know, they have their own power struggles, which you could probably guess, but it kind of has you in with this group the whole time, which is the comedic element there. So they both do different things, but you're right. It gives you a more accessible view through the comedy. And that's why both of these movies are so brilliant.
And it helps show like people in history are just people. You know, when you're looking at old photos and you see like a photo of somebody from the 1800s and they're in those stiff positions because the cameras back then couldn't really move everything. You feel like that's so far away that there's almost no connection to you, and you feel like they're not necessarily real people. You don't see any personality in that.
Yeah.
So you can't tell anything. It's almost like they're just stills kind of looking in from the past. But then there's those photos that you get lucky with sometimes. I know I saw one a little bit ago where people smile. Like it just even that
people
little bit of
that
emotion.
at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying like the really old photos. I just saw one of a couple who got their wedding photo taken, and they actually, instead of just staying still, they chose to like kind of smile and mess up. And it was a cool look to see like, oh yeah, these are just people. And that's what this does for both of these, you know, whether on both sides of these movies, there's horrible people and there's horrible things that happen in history. But then there's also the aspect of the humanity of it that we almost forget too often.
Yeah, I think it's humanity around the as our boy Tom Segura was talking about Hitler, he's kind of a knucklehead. Like it shows the humanity around other people, that these horrible figures. And the point of these movies is to point out the atrocities and the horrible things. But you're right. There is something else to, okay, no, we're not going to point out the humanity in Hitler. There was none there. But we are going to point out that there are children that were getting brainwashed, and we have kind of begun forgetting that, and we're at a weird point in society. Let's throw it in your face. Let's not go too deep into these movies now, though. Let's keep quick talk about, we wanted to talk briefly about what we might do next week, because we both started, well, I started a rewatch of Freaks and Geeks. Winnie, you started watching Freaks and Geeks. And
yeah, first time.
Yeah. So what's your first impression?
First impression is, number one, I didn't know like the cast. I knew that, Seth Rogen and James Franco had met on the cast.
Yeah.
Initially, I forgot that Jason Segel was in it, so I was like, oh shit. And then I kept watching, and just the people in it keeps getting like, more and more.
Oh, yeah.
The cast just keeps
crazy.
getting bigger, and there's so many stars in it and throughout you didn't even realize. I mean, I hope we can, potentially do an episode just going through the series, but it's star-studded, and you see where these people's careers really take a turn, and they just jump off.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing, because so for those who aren't as immersed into it, maybe, Freaks and Geeks is kind of, I think a lot of people call it like a cult classic, but it's a coming-of-age series that only lasted one season. Judd Apatow exec produced it. We've absolutely talked about it on this podcast before, but it's funny because Jason Segel said that the reason that the people are famous from Freaks and Geeks is because Judd took it to heart that they got the axe after one season. He was like, oh, so you don't think this is a good show? Well, I'm going to make these people famous, so you're going to feel like dicks.
Exactly.
And it's just like kind of grown into this thing, but there is just so much content. I forgot each episode was 44 minutes and that there were 18 episodes in a season.
Yeah, that's without commercial breaks or anything. That is 3 seasons of a sitcom now.
Oh, yeah, more. I mean, I think a lot are just 10 episodes now, 22 minutes. It's like a little over 3 seasons, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's a decent chunk to get through, but once you watch it, I mean, if you like it, it's definitely something that you either ride or die with. Yeah. I mean, it's like you love it or you hate it, and that's the case, I think, with these movies today as well. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think that there's a fine line between liking things like this and not liking things, this kind of satirical way of looking at comedy. I know, personally, I love this style of comedy.
Yeah.
I think it's a good change up from what we've been watching, and I'm excited to go through.
Freaks and Geeks, that right?
Freaks and Geeks and Jojo and Death of Stalin.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, I was really excited when we decided to do this. So Jojo, it was my first watch. Death of Stalin, I had a rewatch. And as fun as it is just watching more mindless comedies all the time, sometimes it is nice to sneak in a little more, I guess, depth to movies. And watch
just a little
film.
Substance.
Yeah. Let's get
sprinkle a little substance on there,
a little artsy cinematography too. Watch a proper film. It couldn't
We
hurt.
said we wouldn't do that, but you know what? They're comedies. At their root, at their core,
yes,
they're comedies.
Yes, they're very funny movies.
And they're damn good movies.
And so what we want to point out there, though, is if you have been listening, obviously, again, we've been doing different kind of movies. So little different, and we really want to know what you guys think about this. So if you like it and you think that we should do things like this more often, or if we should just stick to exactly what we've been doing, we might run out of a lot to talk about. But if you really like this and you think that it's a different version of us that's good, please let us know, because we want to know what we should keep doing. We want to know what the people like. So
exactly.
Sincerely Unqualified at gmail.com. You can email us if you don't have social, but as always, you can DM us. Just drop a comment on one of our clips that we post. And yeah, other than that, I think that's probably the best way to reach out to us.
Exactly.
Or leave us a review and on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. We're everywhere except Facebook. So just leave us a comment, send us an email, shoot us a DM. We're here for it. We want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from everybody. So let us know. Let us know what we can do better.
Yeah. Also that, just if we need to cut out one of our sections, if you don't care what our favorite lines are, please let us know. I'm sure that they would end up coming up throughout, but
I mean, definitely, they'd still be in there somewhere. You can't really get rid of that. There's too many quotable things.
You just talk about the lines.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I mean, it's not like we're quoting dramatic lines here. We're not going through and
not the ones that made me cry. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not going through Goodfellas Goodfellas, there's quotable lines, but we're not going through
absolutely
the Lighthouse here, and we're quoting these lines.
Yeah. Do we want to get into the movies? Should we start talking Jojo Rabbit? So
let's do it.
Jojo Rabbit, 2019 movie, written and directed by Taika Waititi. You can pronounce it either way. He's the New Zealand guy, Taika Waititi. He is a very stylistic director. He has a vision, and he kind of always he physically puts himself in his movies a lot of the time. He's known for that. But you know what you're getting with Taika. So I think that Taika himself, because I don't venture too deep into the cinematography and the film, when I see Taika movies, I think that he's pretty similar to Wes Anderson in terms of just his styling of the movies, his cinematography. So I was thinking about it, and you know how we say that there are some rom-coms and then there are some com-roms, like some place comedy before everything else?
Yeah.
In certain movies. I think that Taika is like the more comedic version of Wes Anderson. Like, Wes Anderson movies are comical because of his campiness and his irreverence, but Taika actually makes true comedies, whereas I think even Wes Anderson would probably say, his movies aren't technically true comedies. And what Taika did with this movie is it was adapted from a novel called Caging Skies, and it was actually a really heavy novel, dealt with true deep subject matter in a kid growing up in the Hitler Youth in Vienna, Austria. And there was no imaginary friend. It was really not a funny book, but he said the real way to show people the way to connect people the most to a message is through comedy. And that's what I think he did here so well, is that he basically he adapted a screenplay from a book, put himself in it. He put the Taika Waititi flair, and basically he gave us what we saw. And really what I think about it is, in terms of execution, I don't think it could have been better. I don't know about you, Winnie.
So I don't think it could have been better. I agree with you. I love the style that it's done because it's very original in the way that he goes about doing everything. I think that everything has a purpose, and that there's all of these, yes, Wes Anderson has a style that he loves, a little bit of the quirkiness, the campiness, like you were saying. Yeah. Taika throws that in, but then he also, where Wes Anderson would have a certain shot, Taika uses it to his advantage. I'll just call one out where it's the wide shot when they're at the pool, and then Rebel Wilson scoots all the way over the bench.
He uses the whole frame.
I just think of that. Exactly. Yeah. He uses the entire frame, and then uses it not only for advancing the plot or anything like that. He uses that for comedy, because it's okay, you just get up and walk, or she could just scoot across the entire bench. Everything, every little thing in these movies has a purpose, and it's all done so well. And I mean, it's only enhanced by him inserting himself into it. I think that gives him another perspective from being not only the director, but the character as well.
Right. Yeah. And so we don't want to go into spoilers yet. We're trying something new. We're trying to let people get our take on the movie without getting spoiled by things, because we really spoil things a lot. So just so we're on the same page, let's do a quick plot run through. So
Okay.
Really, the way I look at it is it's a 10-year-old in Austria finds himself like fanatical about the Hitler Youth. He really wants to be up there with Hitler and his like basically bodyguard, to the point where he finds himself as Hitler being his imaginary friend. And he goes to a camp. One grenade accident later, he can't be on the front lines and he can't be Hitler's right-hand man. So he spends a lot of time at home. And during that time at home, he finds a Jewish 17-year-old girl living in his attic. And he knows that his mom was helping her out. His mom is a single mom. He thinks his dad is at war. And the progression of the movie through there is him trying to figure out what to do, essentially, with this Jewish girl that's being harbored in his own home when he's a complete fanatic. So
Yeah.
trying to do no spoilers there.
I think you did it pretty well. I think there's no spoilers in that. Unless you didn't know he was like a Hitler Youth fanatic, then
That's kind of the point of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm saying like everything you laid out is pretty obvious if you've watched like a 30-second
If you
trailer.
watch the trailer, you can get that.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know there was a Jewish girl. Like, all right,
way, she was
then
Jewish?
You just what? You heard the title and you were like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
yeah. So I think basically wrapping up the non-spoiler section is something that's really important to point out, is that it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and that's what they were trying to do. So when you hear about, oh, we're going to make a movie with Hitler as the kid's imaginary friend, it sounds kind of ridiculous, and it sounds really, I would say, risky, because there are certain things that I was watching an interview before, and the interviewer was Jewish, and he was saying we were kind of going through our childhood saying, like, are we even allowed to say the word Hitler? Are we allowed to talk about the Holocaust in movies? And Taika did it to a credit of just, I honestly just think it was masterful, because any notion that you had, like, no comedy was cheap. It wasn't like, oh, this is Hitler. Every joke, every comedic premise was earned, and it was all to the dismay of the Nazis. It was all towards them. There was no cheap humor that you would think would possibly get someone in trouble for making a movie like this. Like, the message was clear throughout.
Exactly. There weren't like any throwaway jokes in there. There wasn't like, because there's all this stuff, like, obviously we grow up and, like you were saying, it's kind of, you can't speak on this stuff. Like, if you have something, it's blood, like, you can't say anything about the topic. It almost feels like you're never supposed to talk about it, when in reality it should be talked about, but it should be talked about in a way that's respectful to the people who are involved. Like,
yeah, and a lot of people actually, like, a lot of Holocaust survivors saw this movie and were very supportive of it. And it's just one of those things that we talked about off the jump. Can comedy be a suitable art form for talking about real things? And I believe the answer is yes. I don't think that's going to shock anyone. But so does Taika, and he thinks that was the way to do it, and it was really funny. It was done super well with the cast. Yeah. But we're going to start kind of getting spoilery. I'm going to run through the cast and how great they all were, but it was reliant on a 10-year-old who was never in a movie before, never acted professionally, and was just incredible in it, and a 10-year-old and a 17-year-old.
And they were both great. They both played their parts so well. And I think that that's a good way to do it. I love that it was from the perspective of a 10-year-old, because it definitely takes you out of the normal thought process when you look at, that whole period in time. When you think about, the Nazis, or even when you think about, when you learned about the Hitler Youth, I mean, in history class or anything, you never really thought about the kids it really impacted.
Yes.
Like how they kind of got into that. You never, it just crossed your mind as, oh, okay, they were these, completely mindless, brainwashed. And then you look at it from this perspective and you remember, like, They were 10.
Yeah.
Like some of these kids were 9 or 10.
And
do you know how impressionable a 9 or 10-year-old is?
Exactly.
If you throw them into any situation, they're going to be like, this is the right way. This is what I'm supposed to do.
It was groupthink even for most adults, and then you give it to 10-year-olds and it's so clear, and that's the point this movie was trying to make. It wasn't making a stance other than this is horrible that these children were forced to do this, and the way that they could use some comedy and the way that they could separate the really, really dark subject matter while also still keeping it present is because they're 10 years old. You know, the idea of Hitler and what he is through a 10-year-old's lens. So I think that plays really well to it, and I think it kind of keeps it a little fantastical. It keeps it like a little rooted from reality in a different vein.
So it lets you know very often that they're not making this a historically accurate Hitler. Like it lets you know from the jump.
Yeah,
you're not expecting it to be like this biopic kind of style. It's not. It's looking at it from, you've had imaginary friends as a kid. They could have been anything. You could have had, when you were a kid, you had all of these crazy imagination, this crazy ideas.
Yeah.
1944. Who do people look up to the most in this situation? Hitler.
Yeah.
So just the idea of having his imaginary best friend, and even something like, when there's no spoilers in this, but when he's in the tent and he's talking to Yorkie, his friend.
Yeah, we can talk about, we can talk more later, but just keeping it general. Yeah, the innocence there. There is some innocence in a complete lack of innocence, but it's not of their own volition. That's what you're supposed to keep in mind, is that these kids are, it's just awful. And it also didn't happen that long ago. But let's break into the spoilers a little here, because we got to talk about the key players. We brought them up. So you have, Taika Waititi, he wrote it, directed it, and plays the imaginary Hitler as this ridiculous kind of character, a ridiculous depiction, I guess, of Hitler. The star of this, the child actor, 10 years old, Roman Griffin Davis, his first professional acting role, playing Jojo, and he follows a very, obviously likely arc. We kind of knew what was going to happen, but it's okay that we knew what was going to happen with him. Yeah. Like, there was only one way to do it, and he does it ridiculously well for not only never having acted, but only being 10 years old and having no experience to draw on with this subject matter.
This is his first movie, and you couldn't get crazier subject matter for you to come into the movie industry and then be like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to be acting alongside Taika, and he's going to be playing your imaginary friend who's also Hitler, and you're going to be in a Hitler Youth.
Bad guy.
And it's a comedy.
He's a bad guy. Yeah. And also, you're going to have to be funny during it.
Hey, and it's a comedy.
Speaking of young people, though, so Thomasin McKenzie is the girl, the 17-year-old Jewish girl living in the attic who has a crazy story that she had to draw upon. She does super well because she has these two kind of lives going on, because she's with Jojo's mom, Scarlett Johansson, another key player in this. And also, she's dealing with Jojo. So she has to deal with two people. She's hiding facts from both of them that, who knows what. It's a whole kind of web of how her character was dealing with that. And her first initial meeting with Jojo, when she's like, they kind of film it like a horror scene. It's like she's the Grudge, basically, coming down from an attic. And then she starts to get completely humanized, and you're on her. Well, you're always going to be on her side, but you're truly on her side right away, just from her personality that shines throughout the at least beginning parts.
what I thought about when that happened was, okay, so imagine you're 9 or 10 and you've been hearing stories about like this crazy monster, whatever it was for you when you were a kid. Like this blah, blah, blah will come get you at night. If you don't do this, it's crazy, it's scary, it's oh my God, it'll kill you, it'll eat you. Imagine you're 10, you've been hearing that your whole life, and then one day it actually like happens, and that thing reaches its hand out of the wall. No matter what it is, no matter what you've been taught, you're gonna shit your pants.
No doubt about that. So, and he does. He lets out a crazy scream. Robert Griffin Davis. That scene itself was so crazy. But then more on the Nazi side, you have Sam Rockwell, who was just on a heater. I think this was his third consecutive Oscar-nominated movie in a row, year by year. Sam Rockwell, incredible actor, and then you kind of have him as a mentor to Jojo. And he's kind of he is a horrible person, but he also gets a little humanized. He has this dead eye, so he can't be on the front lines, but he can be, essentially. So you're intimidated by him. He's a bad person, and then in the end follows a redemption arc to really, keep Jojo alive, actually, which is the best thing you can do for this kid.
Yeah, exactly. And then you find out, so we also have Theon Greyjoy in it, so we have Alfie.
Allen.
Yep.
And they have a weird...
They have a whole rapport going. Also, I don't know if you want to jump into it right away, but their redemption at the end when they made their uniforms.
Yeah.
that was hilarious throughout. There were the little hints of it throughout. Kind of like when he brought in the German Shepherds, and he's like, I didn't actually mean German Shepherds. He's like,
that's something that if I saw it on paper, I would probably think it was so dumb. But it was such needed comic relief at that point in the movie that it's just like, it was so clearly a random throwaway that they were just like, no, let's keep this in. This is actually hilarious. Like, not actually German Shepherds. Then you realize, I'm pretty sure that they are like in love with each other, which is...
Oh, yeah. And then he's immediately like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you. And you're like, oh, okay, there's something else going on here. Something's bubbling below the surface now.
That's one of those like just kind of ingenious things that Taika did, being like, okay, look, it was not only Jewish people. Like, there are certain lines throughout it too, like certain just quick drop-in lines that it's probably not that it's not important enough. That's extremely important, but it would take away from the true point of what they're trying to say there, because if you know about the Holocaust, you know about the other things. So that's kind of their two characters that I thought was good.
Yeah, I thought Sam Rockwell too. Like, from the instant you meet him at the camp, you can tell he's just worn out. He's so depressed. He's alcoholic. He's got the whole thing every time. And then you kind of see when he has the grenade in his hand and Jojo jumps over, grabs it, throws it at the tree, and it blows him up. And he just goes, don't do that. You see that he's really just lost. There's no, urgency or anything.
Yeah.
He just goes, don't do that. This guy is just devastated and lost.
Yeah, he's really down. He's down, and then he kind of that's what's nice about the moment in the end when he ultimately saves Jojo, is that it's the only thing we see him do right in the whole movie. So a few more people. Rebel Wilson's in it. She's there for pure comic relief. You're not going to have Rebel Wilson in a movie that's not just comic relief. Even like you were saying, so we had that camp right off the bat. Sam Rockwell is doing his shooting thing, and Rebel Wilson's like they're pointing out that the boys and the girls are doing different stuff, and Rebel Wilson's like saying, "Oh, you just get to have babies for Germany. Like, congratulations."
She's like a 25-year-old, and she goes, I've had 18 babies for the motherland. What do do you mean?
So she's their kind of right hand man. So like let's firm it up. Even though at this point I'm assuming you've watched the movie. So Sam Rockwell, Rebel Wilson, and Alfie Allen are kind of like the leaders of the non-war part of the Nazis.
They're the leaders of the like Hitler Youth in this city.
Yeah, they're like the admin people. They're like they're corporate.
For reference, like Rebel Wilson's character is essentially like QAnon. She's like the hardcore. She's literally QAnon. Yeah. Like she believes everything.
Yeah. She'll be the purveyor of all these conspiracies. The best thing that they do there is when they were talking. It was the pool scene where Jojo's asking how you can spot a Jew. Oh, if Jews can control people's minds. And she tells him that she goes through this explanation of her uncle actually had his mind controlled by a Jew, which is why he cheated on his wife, and then she left him, and it was all their faults. Just it was a very clever way of just throwing in, like, honestly, like what would essentially could be like a stand-up bit. Like this whole thing that she's dropping in on.
She scoots over and just blames everything that happened in her husband or her uncle's life, which is just normal, reasonable, depressing things to happen to a person, on the Jewish people. She was like, and then he had a stroke, which, doesn't directly have to do with the Jewish people, but I'm sure it had something to do with it. And you're just like, all right.
So you have those three, and Jojo's kind of relying on them. He works for them, and Scarlett Johansson makes sure that Jojo's their prized pupil, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And then on another side, you have Archie Yates, who is he was Jojo's friend, and he was just this adorable kid who ended up being on the front lines. He ended up actually being in the war. And honestly, I don't even know whose performance is better, like his or Roman Griffin Davis, because they are just, he's just so cute, delivers his lines so well, and he can say the most messed up things, but he serves as I guess a voice of reason during some lines. He's like, oh, good. Yeah. Like you got a girlfriend. She's Jewish. And you're like, wait, this kid is a soldier in the Nazi army.
Yeah. Like he's 11 too. And they're like, just the things that he points out. So they use him, I think, to just point out the absurdity of everything. Yes. Yeah. Just because when a child says it and you hear it, and you haven't quite thought about it in that way. Right. You're just like, holy shit.
It hits you in the heart.
That's so simple, and it's absurd. Like, so I'll just say one of the things that he said. Right after the, that's great, your girlfriend is Jewish. And then Jojo's like, so how are we doing in the war? He comes back, he's got that paper uniform on. He's like, our only friends are the Japanese, and between you and me, they don't look very Aryan. Which was just so good. When you hear that, you're like, okay, yeah, there's scrounging for allies here. It's just everything doesn't make sense. And when you hear an 11-year-old say it, you're like, okay.
Yeah, and that's one of those great lines that it just points out the absurdity. I think that they were talking about and then in the war scene, he's talking about the Russians. He was like, oh no, we've moved on from them. Or like they're talking about Jewish people, and he's like, oh no, we moved on from them. Now we just have to worry about the Russians, and they're trying to have sex with our dogs and kill us.
We have to get them before they come take over and have sex. And he's like, and the British are doing that too.
So he is used as a great device of just pointing out the absurdity, because you're meant to feel for Jojo, and you're like, wow, I get why how this kid comes about his own transgressions, and but you have Archie. It's kind of playing, I guess, like a devil's advocate, and he's supposed to be the most hateful of them all. He's literally on the front lines in the army, and he's just pointing out the absurdity. He is used as a great comedic device. One more person I want to point out would be Stephen Merchant, because he's just fantastic. He's very tall, very great actor.
Okay, you forget how tall the dude is, because he's standing next to a child and you kind of see the scale, but then he's standing next to every single other actor and looking down at them, and you're like, holy shit.
Well, we'll talk about it in exclusives, but even like if you look up interviews with them, he is massive compared to everyone else. But that's why he's kind of so perfect, because he's slender, and then he is the Gestapo guy and comes and has a few really funny lines. Actually, there's probably one of the more memorable scenes is him when he's going through Jojo's house, and you realize that they're on to Scarlett Johansson, and he's just this kind of menacing but sweet character at the same time.
Like this endearing psychopath.
Yes.
Who's just coming in, and he's got this charm about him, but he also will ruthlessly kill you no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, you get that vibe that he could be on your side if you're nice, and then flip a switch instantly.
Yeah, that's basically what he did to pull, or what he based his character on. He kind of viewed them as these like very uppity bureaucrats, essentially, that got some taste of power, and then were just like drunk on power, and were just crazy. Well, obviously crazy with what they did, but that scene alone with him in it, just he needed a shout out.
And it's scary in the sense, like, you're on the edge of your seat wondering what's gonna happen.
So suspenseful.
But it's so suspenseful because there's 6 of them, and they're these, like you said, they're these bureaucrats, but they're also the most ruthless people in the entire government.
Yeah.
Just searching through the house. And especially like when she comes out and kind of gives the ID. And then
Sam Rockwell takes it.
And then when he flashes the ID, when Stephen Merchant asks, like, he's like, what is that? And then he's like, all right, he's about to give the ID to Stephen Merchant, and they're going to see the birthday is wrong that she said. And Stephen Merchant just walks by to go see Yoo-Hoo Jew. And that was... that
book.
Was just the most suspenseful.
The name of the book.
The book that is Yoo-Hoo Jew.
Right? Yes, yeah. But Stephen Merchant just that whole scene is crazy, and then that's also a great part of Sam Rockwell's character. Is at the end you figure out that he's actually looking out. He knows, but he likes Jojo that much that he's willing to let bygones be bygones, I guess, in a way.
Exactly.
In terms of extra details that I really liked, so that's also how we're going to do it. We're going to do like really what we thought about the movie, talk about the key players, and then details. So one of the, just right off the first part of this movie, you see Jojo, he's looking in the mirror and he's hyping himself up, and then you suddenly see he's pacing behind him. You know it has to be Hitler, because you kind of know that it's the imaginary friend. And it seems kind of whimsical. It seems off-putting. And then all of a sudden, Taika just drops down on the screen. And you realize this is this really goofy rendition of what Hitler could be, which I think is great. They
really do a great job of instilling from the get-go that it's from a 10-year-old's perspective. Like, this is not the menacing figure that you've come to know in history class and everything. It's what a 10-year-old thinks that person would be. And it's obviously going to be goofy as hell.
Yeah, no, and it sure is. And it was kind of a really good tone setter. And Taika even said, like, he wants people to walk out in the first 10 minutes if they're not okay with it. He's like, I don't need people to sit around and not enjoy the movie. This is what it's going to be, and this is just how it's going to go down. The other pretty quick one that I thought was really good was that when they're at this camp, you see Jojo going through these different emotions as really any kid would. It makes a lot of sense. So you see him really uneasy about certain things, and especially like when they were burning the books, you see that he doesn't really know what's going on, and then all of a sudden the group think kicks in. The wanting to be a part of a group makes him really enjoy it, which I thought was a great way of showing exactly how these kids found themselves in this situation.
Yeah. Like, none of these kids have any idea what they're doing realistically.
No, but it's just,
like,
you know,
all.
everyone else is having a good time, so I guess I'm going to have a good time as well now.
Yeah.
And then, like, also with that, I think what they did really well was it was the most important plot point, I guess, was when they tried to get him to kill the rabbit. There's really long silence, and you realize basically what they're doing is trying to groom these kids for being able to kill human beings at the age of 10, because you look at it and you're like, oh, he's not going to kill a bunny. That bunny's cute. And then you're like, oh, hang on. They're trying to get them to start making steps, which is just, it was like unsettling. And then that's, you know, it has that dramatic part, and then you have him going and Hitler comes along and is being Taika Waititi's goofiness before he runs and grabs the grenade. Just a few things I definitely wanted to point out as incredible plot devices that couldn't go unsaid.
Yeah, and I think that it does a great job in showing that alongside the kind of imagination versus reality aspects of everything, where you see the older kids and they're so excited to go to the front line.
Yes.
Like the kids who try and force Jojo to kill the rabbit are so excited. They're like, Jojo, I'm a soldier. You're just a male boy. And they're like, woo. And then later on, when Jojo's riding his bike, being a kid with his mom, you see these guys coming back and they're just all wounded and having the worst time. And it's almost, the color changes and it becomes this grayer, like, look at everything. And it brings that reality into it versus where these kids thought they were going and the glory they thought they were doing. And then they're coming back all just like, holy shit.
Yeah. It's a sobering kind of thing there. I think that we could probably move on to Inexclusive exclusives here. Probably run it a little longer than normal, but that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we actually mentioned it before a little. Stephen Merchant is just so tall.
Yeah.
So Stephen Merchant is 6'7", and when he's doing this thing with Sam Rockwell, he looks down on him. So Stephen Merchant, 6'7", is looking down at Sam Rockwell at 5'9", and
average height.
Throw it out there, definitely. He's standing on a box. He has that much more height that he's standing on a box looking down on Sam Rockwell like a giant to prove like his macho-ness, I guess.
Michael Jordan is 6'6". Just think about that. And then think about being an actor and not on a court.
Actor and director.
An incredible actor. Like the first time I ever saw Stephen Merchant, I didn't realize how tall he was.
Yeah.
And now it's less shocking to see it, but in this they use it to their advantage, so they're trying to make it shocking.
Yeah.
And they did it perfect.
He's probably not that athletic, I would guess. If
you never know, man.
He could be.
You never know.
You got to assume. No, the average NBA player is that tall.
I don't know. I mean, not to put him down.
No,
I don't see him.
I love you, Steven.
I don't see him having killer handles.
I can't see him crossing anyone up.
No.
The other thing that's probably important to note about this movie that's a cool fact is that Taika wrote this in 2012, and then there were 3 movies that he directed between directing this one, and it was a follow-up to Thor Ragnarok, which is just an absolute blockbuster Marvel movie that has his stamp on it, the first Marvel step in a different direction. And the obviously the author of the book needs to kind of greenlight it, so he built up enough of a catalog for the author to look back on of the original book and realize that what she said was, he doesn't get any unearned laughs. There are no unearned jokes. So she sees the great drama and the great comedy and was like, okay, you can take my really serious book and make it funny.
Exactly. And he did just that. And then, so in doing that, he obviously played Hitler himself. So when Taika was playing Hitler, and just a little note, he's Jewish. When he was asked about why he chose to play the role of Adolf Hitler, he said, the answer's simple, what a better fuck you to the guy. And then a follow-up, he was asked, did you do any research for the role about Hitler?
Yeah.
As some actors are known to do, no matter who they play. He said, essentially,
Take it easy.
no, he's a fucking C-word.
C-word. Yeah, there we go. There we go. We can say
you
the
want me-
F word.
do you want
Let's
me to
let's
say
leave
it?
the C-word out.
Yeah.
If you want to, that's on you.
Hey, nope.
No,
Gonna
we'll leave it.
leave
to
it to the imagination.
Well, he says it in
Look,
like
wait.
his
I'll give
own
you-
voice.
Exactly. I'll give everybody the opportunity to say it for themselves. So essentially, now that you know what it is,
Go, everyone.
He was a fucking.
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
Good job, everyone. If you said it, if not, good
Thank
job.
you. Thanks for playing along.
Yeah, but he really thought of this movie as a love letter to his mother and basically single parents everywhere, because he saw himself most in Scarlett Johansson's character, because she's raising this kid, and then you add on top of it that they have very differing, we'll say, political views. And he said, like, he really didn't realize until he grew up just how tough it is to raise a kid. So he kind of, it wasn't even like a B plot. You're dealing with a lot of subject matter, and then you add on the single mother thing, and that's why he kind of said it was a love letter to her.
Well, especially when the external factors, like raising a kid now, you have all these external factors like Twitter and Facebook and blah, 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 whatever. I mean, when we were growing up, we had like Xbox Live parties. I think those shaped our childhood the most.
Unfortunately.
I think it's safe to say that when the external force behind your child is the Nazis, that's a pretty tough way in the movie to raise the kid.
Yeah, not good.
So that just shows, I think that it's a great love letter to mothers out there doing their best.
Yep. Everyone's just trying to do their best out here.
Yeah, exactly. Then Sam Rockwell was trying to do his best in the movie as well. So, his character had like a slight accent. He was doing his best to kind of keep it in tone with, how everybody talked, but obviously everybody spoke English and not German. Mm-hmm. The cool thing that they did do in the movie actually is when the Americans capture everybody and Jojo starts speaking to them, he's like speaking in English to us, but to the American soldier, he's speaking another language. He's like, I don't understand what this kid's saying, which I thought was a cool little touch that they threw in there. But Sam Rockwell actually had a dialogue coach to try and learn the accent. Alongside that, he watched classical actors like Marlon Brando, Ralph Fiennes, and Oscar Werner, who portrayed World War II era Germans, but ultimately decided that his character would be more like Bill Murray with a German accent, which is
so
definitely
much like,
one way to pivot.
You don't realize how much like Bill Murray in this movie he is until you hear that. You're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
He was like a German Bill Murray, basically, and that's it.
I mean, it makes so much more sense, everything that happened now. Like, if I were to go back and rewatch and knowing that now, everything would be a little bit more clear as to why it was that way or why he decided to do things.
Yeah. No, I would absolutely agree.
I think that's cool because Bill Murray in Wes Anderson movies is great, and now we have Sam Rockwell doing a German Bill Murray in a Taika movie.
Yeah, it's like the European version of Bill Murray.
Exactly.
Do you want to rapid fire through our favorites quick? Because we already mentioned the characters. Who do you have for your favorite character?
Rebel Wilson.
Yeah.
For sure.
So many funny lines, so much comedic value to her. Her just character in herself was the comedic break.
Yep.
So mine actually would be the Captain Klenzeldorf, Sam Rockwell, which is just a ridiculous name. Well, sorry, Germans that are listening. I don't think that's ridiculous, but okay. My scene.
My scene
is like when they're at camp, it starts it out with they have Archie throwing the knife off the tree and it's sticking into someone's leg, and then it's just like really, it's kind of funny, but then at the same time you realize the gravity of just this crazy situation that these kids are in.
Yeah, I like just number one, why are you throwing it right at the tree and then it just bounces right in the leg?
That reminded me so much of like, that's where I got the Wes Anderson vibe, I think, is because it reminded me a lot of Moonrise Kingdom, which was
absolutely it was Moonrise Kingdom, except they're Nazis.
Right, unfortunately.
And instead of Bill Murray, they had Sam Rockwell, who's doing Bill Murray. It's literally a ton of parallels
with the dead eye.
Yeah, exactly. All right, you want to jump into lines?
Sure, yeah. So mine is from Stephen Merchant in that scene that we were talking about. He's like, "Oh yeah, no, it's just standard. A lot of people are calling all the time. Hello, is this the Gestapo? I think there's a communist hiding behind my fridge." Like,
and then he's like, and then we just go, and it's a little bit of mold, which isn't too far off.
He is so good in just that quick delivery, and then hello, this is the Gestapo. I think there's a communist hiding behind my fridge. It's so good.
It's so good. I love it. I mean, he's so good. For me, I gotta throw in a Rebel line where it's towards the end of the movie when they're talking about like Russians coming for them and everything. She just butts into a conversation and just goes, "My friends once met some Russians and they ate him." And that's it. What?
That's another one of those things that just like you need to keep bringing up the fact that it was a lot of other people. Mine is from Sam Rockwell in the pool scene where Jojo's asking how you can identify a Jew, and he's like, how do you think that you can find a Jew or something? And it ends up with Sam Rockwell saying, "Yeah, no, me neither. Without their hats, it's damn near impossible." Their hats.
Without their hats.
He's supposed to be like the Nazi, and he just says
he's
no.
like the war hero, came back from the front lines.
Yeah.
Without their hats.
It's damn near impossible.
I love this slow transition for him, just to slowly not giving a fuck about that at all. Yeah. So my last line is when Jojo's having a conversation with his imaginary friend, and Taika asks, like, "How's it going with the Jew thing upstairs?" And Jojo goes, "She doesn't want to talk to me." And he goes, "Well, you are a Nazi."
Well, you are a Nazi.
Yeah.
He has a few really funny ones.
It just made perfect sense. It's like, well, yeah, when you think about it like that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I wouldn't like a Nazi either.
Definitely for honorable mention, though. We mentioned it before, like, when Sam Rockwell's just like, "Finkel, I meant dogs for when the city is attacked, not actual German shepherds."
Yeah, the shepherds are there. They happen to be German.
They just have their like outfits on, their bugles. They're just standing there for no reason.
Yeah, that one is great. And then there is one that Taika says is the imaginary Hitler. He's talking about the girl upstairs, and he says she's a little female Jewish Jesse Owens, Jack the Ripper. He's like, it's the result of them like adding things onto her to make her seem like this crazy character.
And she'll kill you. And then they just add
Jack the
Ripper on there. It's so good. Definitely love this movie. I think it did a great job with what it was going for, and worth the watch if you haven't watched it, because it's such a different version of the classic comedy. It takes you into that world for a little bit and shows you the real absurdity of everything.
Yeah, no, and it's on HBO Max. So if you have HBO Max, go give it a listen or watch.
Yeah,
and give our podcast a listen. Just listen to it. Don't watch it.
Put it on in the background and don't watch it.
All right, let's get into Death of Stalin.
All right, I'm all for getting into Death of Stalin, because as we know from my top 10 rankings, this is my number 4 of all time. Big stuff. After watching it again, probably the 6th time I've watched it, it stays right there. It stays right at number 4. It's just primed right there. What did you think coming out of the watch?
So coming out of the rewatch, I kind of felt the same way. I really felt like it's a very, very good movie. It's just that Jojo Rabbit is more up my alley. I kind of like the campiness kind of action. I like the more outlandish, like whimsical nature. I just like Taika. Like, honestly, one of my favorite movies is Thor Ragnarok. So this is not a slight to Death of Stalin. It's a fantastic movie. I was just more entertained during Jojo. But Death of Stalin is hilarious. There's no doubt about that. That's my impression on it, basically.
Oh, yeah. I think that they do such a good job of... And it was actually one of the things that Armando Iannucci wanted to do when he took on this project. So he's also known for like Veep and a couple other things. But when taking this on, he really just wanted to balance that, you know, comedy with the somberness of these being bad people.
Yeah.
So I'll just give you like a quick rundown of the plot. Just for anybody who hasn't seen it, definitely worth the watch.
Yep.
So,
Non-spoiler.
Death of Stalin, it follows the title. Essentially, Stalin, who is the leader of the Soviet Union after and during World War II. So this takes place in 1953. Stalin is the leader during this time. He's the dictator. He's the Soviet Union leader. Everybody kind of bows down to him. He's super, you know, tyrannical in the sense that he can put you on a list at any time and essentially get you sent to the gulags or taken care of. So there's this kind of paranoia throughout his inner circle and also the community as a whole, just the country and everybody under him, that say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. Even, I mean, in the first scene, we see an orchestra and Stalin calls and asks for the recording. They hadn't recorded it. They have to wrangle everybody up, bring them back in, and basically redo the entire recording. And everybody is really worried that it's going to be late, everything like that. So during this time in 1953, Stalin dies and his crew, basically everybody under him, which was Khrushchev, Beria, Zhukov, Malenkov, all of the guys who held top positions in the Soviet Union government.
The committee.
The committee are bantering internally for power throughout. So we have an incredible cast. The key players are Steve Buscemi, Simon Russell Beale, Rupert Friend, Jason Isaacs, Jeffrey Tambor, and so many others who just make the movie great. And they're playing these key top Soviet Union officials who in real life were some of the most terrifying individuals of all time.
Not good people.
And no, especially I'd say, you know, Beria, who's played by Simon Russell Beale, who gives an outstanding performance. But like, he was the leader of the secret police in the Soviet Union. He's the guy who carried out the lists. And a few of the little things, like he took the list to Stalin, got approval, and then even some of his friends like were on the list, people in the government. A guy, Molotov, who's played by Michael Palin, the night before Stalin died, he was on one of the lists. Stalin dies, Beria takes him off the list. So it's really just going through this kind of power struggle.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. That's an easy way to put it without spoilers, is that there is a power struggle that ensues after the death of Stalin, basically.
Yeah, that's the one sentence version. But it's crazy to me that they took this idea, this history of everything that happened, and they, like we said for Jojo, put it into a real form or a real way to look at it, not just from the outside perspective, but they brought comedy into it and they didn't force anything.
No, absolutely. And you said outside perspective, like not in the outside perspective. That's exactly right. You're inside. You're kind of in with that interview with something that you would never ever see. You would never be in the inner workings with all these people. So that's what makes it interesting. And then you realize that obviously, like, the plot the progresses and it's very interesting, but at the same time some of the comedy comes from just like they're people, they're going through their lives. It's always funny thinking about like, oh well, what them running into a car like to try to leave before everyone else.
Exactly. Just the constant trying to one up everybody. Like when Steve Buscemi's character, I mean, I say character in the sense of portraying them in the film, but he played Nikita Khrushchev. So this guy was like the leader of the Soviet Union for a while. He's not just a character, which is also really cool because it's bringing to light history, but it's making it way more real than we read about.
Right.
And this movie actually won a BAFTA award for adapted screenplay and outstanding British film of the year. Mm-hmm. So did pretty well. Yeah, so let's go into So for reference, for Rotten Tomatoes, it got a 95% from critics, a 78 from audiences, but a 95 from critics is substantial.
Yeah, and I think the audience score isn't too surprising because I can see this kind of not going over people's heads because there's not, that's kind of almost the point, is it's very direct and it allows you to follow through with it. But I could see it not being for everyone.
Exactly. It's a very specific and kind of niche style of comedy where you don't have to understand the history, but it sure does fucking help.
At least
understand
like a assembling of like what happened. Yeah, the very basics.
Like know who the players are a little bit. Know who Stalin is, first of all. If you don't, you're probably not going to understand this movie. You might think it's fiction. Like that's a good...
It would be likely that it's fiction because that guy did some bad stuff.
Yeah.
Bad stuff.
So what did you think of the premise versus the product? I want to get your perspective on this first.
I thought, again, it was executed very well. And I think the premise of it is very, very straightforward. Like, here's the power struggle after Stalin dies. And the way that they did it was just so ingenious. Like I said, you're in with these people. You're seeing the weird little... like you see them walk between rooms. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but you see like things that you definitely would not see on the news when you're hearing about this power struggle or even in-depth documentaries. So you're kind of, and also you hear a lot of funny lines because I think that this movie was more punched up in terms of jokes and one-liners because of the way it was filmed. And it is hilarious in terms of that. Like the writing of this movie is very, very good.
Oh yeah. And then even so, they had guys like Jeffrey Tambor, who's great at improv. I mean, I know Simon Russell Beale in an interview was just like, I'm not necessarily comfortable with improv. And then they brought in these guys around you, like the Steve Buscemi's and the Jeffrey Tambors, who do this for a living. Like they're very good at this. So some of the lines were even just improv.
Right. I mean, that's a good point.
It's just them being, and you wouldn't think that for a movie kind of based in history to bring improv into it. Yeah. But some of the banter between these characters is way too good, especially when they're in the committee meetings. Just seeing how they all interact with one another is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have people that are good enough, and like even if people aren't, you know, if you're a really good actor, that's almost like what a good amount of improv is. It's just the essence of acting and like keeping on your toes, reacting, all that. So I think that's another thing. If you can write such a crazy script and historically accurate for the most part and allow for room for improvisation, you know that you have a really solid idea that's hit on very well.
Exactly. And I think, like, I'll say this about premise versus product. I think it was based on a graphic novel, but the way that the story is told is done so well that it really just highlights the ruthlessness of these guys. Like it doesn't shy away from the fact that these were horrible, like terrifying human beings.
That message is clear. There's no doubt about that.
But it also effortlessly brings in comedy.
Right.
Which
is very hard to do.
So hard because that balance, you're walking at such a thin line where you have these guys huddled up talking about like people dying, getting killed, and then you can like Stalin's body is on the floor in one scene and he pissed himself, and then these guys are still going back and forth cracking jokes, or there's just a line that's not necessarily funny in the context but to everybody outside is hilarious.
Yeah, and that actually is something I would say if we are talking like premise versus product, and in terms of both these movies. And when I talk about the differences and I talk about what I like and don't like in terms of the premise and what they were trying to do, I think that this movie is more impressive. I think that what they were able to do with just, like weaving in humor in a movie that could have been, if you took out all the humor, it was still a very good movie. But they weaved it in so well. I think that they did a better job at that. I just happen to enjoy Jojo more,
Yeah, understandable. And I agree. Like, if you switch out a few actors in this, it turns into a drama.
Yes.
Like, it turns into a power-hungry struggle, the Departed style movie.
Yeah.
Where you're just on the edge of your seat a little bit. What's going to happen? Who's going to get killed? So, like, I want to jump into a few, like, of the little details that I loved.
Yeah.
Because there were so many throughout the movie just watching. So, one of the things is just the orchestra scene at the beginning that I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
They do such a good job of immediately instilling in you how terrifying it really was during this time.
Yes. Yeah, because you have... an orchestra is generally looked at as one of the least high stakes places that you could have at movies or movie scene take place. But when you have all of that build up, you kind of like don't realize why you are so stressed and why you're on the edge of your seat with these orchestra leaders.
Yeah, and even like they do a good job of that and weaving in the comedy almost immediately, where he gets the phone call from Stalin and he's like, okay, I'll call you back in 17 minutes. Is it recording? He has the conversation with the other guy in the booth and they're like, no. And he's like, oh, well, how long has it been since he called? 30 seconds, a minute? And they're all freaking out and just have no idea. And then eventually it gets to the point where, well, is the room bugged? Because they say one thing, they think they're going to get sent away. It's just...
And they're all saying really nice things very loud.
Yeah. Just screaming them. And then, I mean, in that scene too, what they do for the viewer is really just weave in, when they're going to get the other conductor, they send guys out to go get him. And at the same exact time, the list that Beria sent for the people who are going to get executed is going into the same building. So they have these guys banging on doors and the conductor's like, all right, honey, this is it. Walks through the door in his pajamas and like, hey, sir, we need you to come to the orchestra and do this. It's like, well, what the hell is it? There's people being escorted out in the background.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Edge of your seat. And then just, hey, we need you to come orchestrate a play or the orchestra. Conduct
Do you
the
think
orchestra.
that some of the comedy comes from like the release of tension almost?
Oh, I
like
mean,
the kind of relief that you get when you know, like, that guy's, oh, he's just a conductor. Like, that's hilarious.
that's a lot of comedy in general. A lot of comedy is just release of tension. So yeah, that is a perfect example of it though. You're right with the conductor. There's so much tension building, then you just see that it's in fact not them and it's the people that just need him to go record this thing. It is definitely, I think this movie plays with that a lot.
Yeah, and that scene, I could talk about that scene for like 25 minutes where they're just getting people from the street. Like, they're like, oh, get the fatter people because they'll lessen the sound. They'll dampen the sound more. They go, seriously? He goes, I don't know.
I'll get my wife.
Yeah, like just weaving that in. Another little thing that I loved is when Stalin is alive at the beginning and everybody's kind of doing this thing together. They have their meeting and everybody's there. And then Stalin, they're having dinner. They're having a great time talking about, war stories, everything like that. And then Jeffrey Tambor's character mentions somebody. He's like, oh, where's Perekov or something? And it gets silent.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows, like, oh, you fucked up for bringing up that name. it's just balancing that, and then almost immediately after, he's like, "Who wants to watch a John Wayne Western?" And you're like, "Where the?" Where did
It's
this
like
come from?
absolute delusion from like what you're doing is horrible.
Just the shift in the mood from like, where did he go? I'll tell you where he went. Like, I killed him. And then Steve Buscemi getting tomatoes shoved in his pocket.
Tension and release. Yeah.
Exactly.
Build
Just
up.
Build up, release.
Yeah.
Build up, release. It's so good. I love that everybody was using their, like, you know, actual speaking voice.
I was waiting for you to mention this. I'm so happy.
Like, so happy.
That makes it inherently hilarious that you have American accents. Well, not just American accents. You have Steve Buscemi speaking like Steve Buscemi.
Yeah. Steve Buscemi is just a guy from New York who's playing Nikita Khrushchev.
Yeah.
Like,
and then you have like the British accents, which like, sorry, British ways of speaking. We got slack on saying accents before.
I will say
the way British people speak.
In it?
What?
The funniest in it is a British thing.
I know.
I think, I think Jeffrey Tambor being who he is and not having to do an accent.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that he didn't, because it would have been like in Ocean's 11, when the older guy has to do that fake accent the whole time.
Yeah.
It would have just been everyone doing that, and it would have felt flat. Can you imagine hearing jokes from Jeffrey Tambor like, that would have kind of been...
It would have been really bad, and it would have taken people out of it. We actually have something on Inexclusive exclusives about that, but as to the reason why. But we're happy that it happened. We can say that now.
Yeah. I love that. I love all of the like comedic one-liners. I love that they were true to history too, a little bit. Like, they did their best in this movie to ensure that there was like a background, and they also kept it historically accurate in the fact that the speech and the ways that everybody kind of talked to each other, it was nobody wanted to say the wrong thing ever.
Yeah, there was so much diplomacy in every single thing that they said. Even
Stalin's son, like, when he's coaching the hockey team and some guy says, like, mentions the plane, and he's like, what plane? Soviet planes don't crash. It's like, even those little things that they throw in there, just maintaining that allure of, no, we're perfect. What are you talking about? What are you doing?
Yeah, it shows like it's another brainwashing thing, basically.
Yeah.
It shows exactly how things must have been. Obviously we didn't grow up then, but
yeah, I love those little details. I love that they maintained that no matter who was struggling for power, it had to be done through the committee. Like, they always had to have those meetings, even if it was like who was planning the funeral for Stalin. They determined it within the committee. Like, they were all voting with each other for Steve Buscemi to do it in the committee. I think that they handled it really well, and I think that they highlighted a lot of things that needed to be highlighted really well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, gotta love this movie. We can go into some inexclusive exclusives about it, like we mentioned before, because there's a few good things that they do with this movie that are really cool.
Yeah, let's do it. Start us out here.
So, with the release of the movie, obviously, you know, it would be weird for this style of movie and this kind of movie to be released in Russia. I think you can agree with that. I think that's pretty safe to say. Whether, like, it's just pure satire.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. I bet some Russians would really like it, though.
Yeah. Well, you know, they didn't get the chance, unfortunately, because this movie was banned in Russia on January 23rd in 2018, which was 2 days before it was due to be released. And the cultural ministry stated that the distribution certificate for the film Death of Stalin has been withdrawn. One member of the cultural ministry's advisory board was quoted as saying, "The film desecrates our historical symbols, the Soviet hymn, orders and medals, and Marshal Zhukov is portrayed as an idiot."
The desecration's a strong word, and then you close it out with idiot.
You can tell that they were definitely not happy with this.
Probably not so much.
And then they added to this that the movie's release right in the advance of the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Stalingrad, which is a very, very important battle for World War II in general.
Yes.
Which is February 2nd, would be, quote, an affront to Russia's World War II veterans, which that I do agree.
That has legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's got, the other stuff is understandable,
They use the word desecrate. They mean business.
Yeah, it's similar to the interview not being allowed
Yes.
in North Korea. I'd say that there's a similar level of like,
That one,
why'd you do this?
not too
that one
surprising.
was a little bit, no.
That's not too surprising.
Not at all.
So we mentioned the accents, and obviously everyone's using their own accents, and that was clearly a choice. So Armando Iannucci decided to not have them have Russian accents because he just figured it would have taken people out of the movie. And also we talked about that improv when there was room to improvise and he wanted to get those really funny lines, those really funny interactions. He didn't think people would be able to do it as well as they did while they were also trying this Russian accent. That's not only to say that there are many different kinds of Russian accents, especially back when it was the USSR. There were about, I think I saw 400 or so people said different accents that you could call Russian. So you don't want the historical inaccuracies if you're going to go to that extreme. So it just adds a whole thing to this movie that they're not speaking in a Russian accent that makes it hilarious for that alone. But also you get the better improv. You get the people actually into the movie, because once you get over that fact, like if you're watching this movie and you're like, oh no, I really think that they should have Russian accents, this movie's probably not for you.
Then go turn on the History Channel, because it's not supposed to be that.
Right.
It's like, that's similar to watching an ancient Roman movie and they all have British accents and then just being like, well, why don't they just speak with the other accent? It's like, there's certain liberties that are taken in filmmaking, and I think this one is a perfect example where it's just better overall, and if you can't get past it, then that's
on you.
That's on you. That's purely on you. It's, I mean, get over it. So, Jason Isaacs in the movie, who played Georgy Zukev, so he explained that his decision to play Zukev with an Yorkshire accent, he said, the bluntest people I know are Yorkshiremen.
Yorkshiremen?
In an interview, Yorkshiremen? Yeah,
Probably.
Is that not how you...
I thought you said Yorkshireman.
Yorkshireman? Yorkshireman?
Yorkshireman.
Did say it as quickly as possible. Yorkshireman?
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. In an interview, he essentially also said that to play this character, he did basically zero research and tried to play him as a great big swaggering dick.
Which he was.
Yes, he was.
That dick was big and
Let me
swaggering.
just say, this guy won essentially World War II for the Soviet Union. So he probably had the right to do that. There are records of like him just being the guy who could go up to Stalin and say whatever he wanted, and he would never be unseated from power.
He was probably a badass. Let's not lie.
Yeah.
Not a good guy. But
noted not good guy, but also like not one to be trifled
the acting
with.
decision made sense, we'll say.
Yes.
Yeah. So you actually
agreed.
You mentioned it before with Vasily, his Stalin's son. So there was a plane crash that was mentioned, and actually that was true. So in 1950, there was a plane crash that killed 19 people on board, and there were 11 players from the Soviet Air Force hockey team, the team doctor, and a masseuse. And Vasily Stalin was the team's patron, and he feared his Stalin's reaction so much that he tried to downplay it like ridiculously. It's like the seriousness of it, and he tried to recruit replacement players just so his dad wouldn't find out. Like, what? That is just that joke's written for you. The fact that that's true is insane.
And they, like we mentioned a little bit before, they did that so well. They were like, oh yeah, we still have Broussard who survived the crash. He goes, what crash?
He's trying to pretend like it didn't happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
The other hilarious thing about his character is that he's just like a raging alcoholic. Well, maybe some people wouldn't find it funny, but it's used as a comedic device, like with his speech and everything. And apparently that's true. Apparently they didn't have to really downplay that. And like, that is something that this guy unfortunately had to deal with. It was alcoholism, but there were a lot of things that kind of we were able to laugh at about that.
Yeah. They played into that when he was writing the speech and Barry was just kind of like, oh, here, have a drink. Like,
Yeah.
help you write.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want him to speak. And then he goes on. I thought probably like his saddest and funniest moment is when he's saying the speech and he's like, Georgian Cubs, Ukrainian Cubs, and then just gets drowned out by the flyover.
I thought that was hilarious. Everyone's clapping because it's the flyover and he just gets cut off.
Russian Cubs, Ukrainian Cubs.
And he's just going all of the USSR.
Yeah. That was, and then I just want to note too, like his sister, because we mentioned that it was true that Vasily was actually an alcoholic. So Svetlana, who was played by Andrea Riseborough, she did a lot of research in an interview, like noted that Svetlana actually had a book about her. It's called Stalin's Daughter. And she ended up living into her 80s and she died in Wisconsin.
I could have picked a long list of places that I would have thought that she died, and Wisconsin would probably not have been on that list. Wouldn't even been towards the
would
bottom.
be
Which is
the last thing that I ever put on that list.
I wonder if she liked Wisconsin. Like, I wonder if there was something about Wisconsin that she liked, or if it was just like she happened to end up there.
Do you think that she was a Packers fan?
She probably was more into hockey, I would bet. I don't know how into football she got.
Wisconsin has no hockey team, right? Whatever.
No.
I don't think
No.
so. So basically, another thing. So Georgy Malenkov, his saying of no problem when Jeffrey Tambor says no problem, kind of with that inflection and that tone, is possibly a nod to the famous Russian winged word, which can have opposite meanings kind of depending on the punctuation or the speaker's intonation. So there's two sentences that could be used. Pardon, impossible to be executed, could also essentially mean pardon, impossible to be executed. So it's really just kind of ambiguous as to what it means, and you play around with it. So that was a nice nod that they threw in there.
Yeah. And that's almost like poking fun at the whole lack of accents thing in terms of like this being in English, like that pronunciation of what they might have meant, because he was like, no problem. And then also it shows the group dynamic so well. He's supposed to be the leader and he wants all that power. He's like, no problem. And then the people say it has to be, or it actually is a problem. He just goes, I meant no problem. Just ignore me.
No problem. Just the delivery of all these lines is incredible too.
Tambor was perfect to deliver that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And one last thing that I'll toss in, because we mentioned the radio scene quite a bit, the orchestra scene. So that turns out it was real. It actually happened. But in real life, the first conductor that they brought in to replace the original was actually drunk. But they cut that from the movie because it seemed too insane.
Yeah.
And they also cut or lessened Jason Isaacs Zukov. They lessened the amount of medals that he wore because they thought it looked too ridiculous. But actually, in real life, there were so many more medals on this guy's chest.
Just a ridiculous amount of metal.
Yeah.
But that has to like be cumbersome to wear. That has to be heavy.
Do you know they could hear you coming from 6 miles away?
It's too late at that point.
I mean, yeah. He's a big swinging dick.
Big swaggering dick, yeah. You want to move on to favorites? You want to go character for character?
Let's do it.
Who you got?
I got to go with Jeffrey Tambor.
Yeah.
Malenkov. I think that him and Beria together, like him and Steve Simon Russell Beale, they are perfect for each other. And even if Simon Russell Beale didn't think that improv was for him before this, or if he was wondering about his performance, the two of them combining is perfection.
Yeah, it ended up being kind of those two versus everyone else, just because, Simon Russell Beale, his character, was just trying to get all the power, and he knew that the best way to do it was through Jeffrey Tambor. But that, in a way, it made Jeffrey Tambor such a better character. Like, he had so much to work with because he was this kind of incompetent successor of Stalin, which is crazy. Exactly. But
who you got?
I'm going to have to go with Steve Buscemi, just because he's Steve Buscemi.
That's it.
No,
that's it. That's Mr. Pink.
Yeah, he's really good in this movie because he kind of he has a good attitude to play Khrushchev, and then you can tell he has so many different motivations going on, and he's known as like the most humane guy in the movie until in the end you realize it was literally just a ploy. Everything was a ploy for him to get power, which actually happened, which I think just makes that character crazy. Like, the only basically where are they now that we get at the end was just that he rose to power at some point and then also got overthrown, which I actually didn't know about. So when I saw that, I was like, wow, like that this movie was literally about him basically just going for it.
Exactly. And he plays the part so well, where it's at the start, you think he's kind of like this goofball, and the director noted that he kind of wanted your interpretation of Simon Beale's character to change with Steve Buscemi. So they kind of intercept through the movie. Like, Steve Buscemi starts off as this Joker character, and then Beale starts off as this hard ass, and they kind of change where at the end you feel a little bad, even though they're both horrible.
I mean, it is.
You feel a little bad for...
That's brutal. That was a brutal thing to watch.
Which is, I mean, they have so much comedy in this movie, and then you have a scene like that where it just sombers the entire movie.
Yeah.
And 2 seconds later, you can have a joke. I don't understand how it works or why it works, but...
That scene's so powerful, too, just because... So we're not going to talk about it during scenes, because that's not one of our favorite scenes. But when we're talking about that tension and then release, the way that they use all of the commotion, everyone's screaming, then boom, gunshot, loud noise, just a pure silence. It's like haunting, basically. You see it and you're just like, holy crap, what just happened? And that's why it's so moving. That's why it can be an absolute comedy until that happens, and you're just like, wow, these obviously the stakes were very high, and it didn't turn out so well for one of them.
It was done so well that you almost feel like you were a part of the situation. Like, you almost felt like you were there because of that silence creeping out into... Like, the silence was so loud.
Yeah, that was some loud silence. No doubt about that.
Oh, yeah. Loud ass silence.
In terms of our favorite scenes, though, let me know what your favorite scene was.
All right. So for me, it's a little bit gruesome. It's a little bit out there. But the autopsy scene... where they're... I mean, come on. Everything that happens, it's just... they have a machine. They're cutting my father's head open and putting it in American life.
It's like he's dead. He just comes in, tries to shoot people. We're talking about Vasily I'm assuming you guys remember, but there were so many great lines in that scene.
The struggle for the gun at the end too, where the guy's just like slowly putting him in a headlock and everyone's just watching.
Yeah.
Watching and not doing anything. They're like, what is going on?
That was so bad. It went so long. That whole struggle was so long.
I love that they kept like the whole thing in there too. It's just and no other noise except like
a few grunts. Like
It's so perfect.
Mine is on the same topic of death, death of Stalin, but it's the ultimately the funeral, and that's a super long scene. So I'll be specific. The part where everyone's starting to show up and they're just deciding Steve Buscemi's trying to just knocked my mic. Steve Buscemi is trying to take places with Jeffrey Tambor, and he's like, oh no, we'll make it like we'll make it look like it's part of the ceremony. He's trying to stand in certain spots. That is so funny. And then there's so many jokes about why they let the bishops in. Like, for some reason, the bishops were just getting eviscerated in this movie. Because, I mean, obviously they didn't like the bishops, but...
Yeah. Like, who let those fucking lunatics in here?
Yeah, like, it said like 4 times.
Steve Buscemi's like, ask Barry if he invited the bishops. Tambor's like, don't give me orders. And then he turns to the guy next to him and goes, ask Barry if he invited the bishops. So good.
Yeah.
So confused about why they're there. I mean, the best part, I think, honestly, was what you mentioned, the ceremony. Like, make it seem like it's part of the ceremony, where he slowly just steps to the side, steps forward, and Jeffrey Tambor is like, what the fuck are you doing?
It's almost more ridiculous, especially because, like, siding with Tambor, I mean, he is the new Stalin. Why would you step in front of him in this situation?
Yeah. Or, like, try and switch places. Like, what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
I don't know. Crazy. You want to jump into lines?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. So my first line is when Jason Isaac is talking to Steve Buscemi, and they're trying to kind of like start the coup up a little bit against Beria, and they're basically like, Steve Buscemi just said, oh, we're gonna do this, like we're gonna overthrow him and blah blah blah, and Jason Isaac's character is like, I'm gonna have to report this conversation, threatening to do harm or obstruct any member of the presidium in the process. And then he starts laughing. He goes, look at your fucking face.
He immediately turns.
He's just messing with him. He's like, I'm on board. Fuck that guy.
Yeah. And then you know he's the boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
My first one would be, it's Vasily. We talked about him, but it's actually during the funeral scene when they're talking about like what to do. So his sister, the really strong one, is basically talking to him like, hey, you know what to do, right? He goes, yes, I know the drill. Smile, shake hands, and try not to call them a C word. He actually says it in
1 episode.
2 an episode. That's pretty bad.
Wow.
Bad boys of podcasting. That
we will not say it.
We will not say it. But
Look,
that line right there.
If we were in Australia, we could be saying it. Like if this was if Jim Jeffries. Look,
We're
I just
American,
want
though,
to insert. I'd love to insert like a Jim Jeffries soundbite over it, just to have.
We'll do it.
All right, we'll see.
We'll see what we can do.
But my second line is between the greatest combo, Tambor and Beale, where Jeffrey Tambor is now the leader. He's walking to like the funeral, and Beale just goes, are you wearing a corset? And he goes, it's a girdle. I have a bad back. It's function, not cosmetic. I think a little bit is hanging out the back.
Oh yeah, the strings are. The strings are so noticeable too against his black suit.
I was wondering if they were going to call that out too.
Yeah, you knew it had to. Like they were there on purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
My second one, the last one, is from Tambor, and he's trying to get the picture of he's trying to get the young girl that Stalin had, the wave, and he overlooked the fact that she was grown up now, or at least had grown up a little, and they went through 3 girls, like 3 young girls that look the same, and he was like, no, that's not going to work, get the real girl. And it's just going on through it, and then they finally get the real girl, and he's like, I got him for you. He just goes, she's the size of an ostrich. No. It's like he says, like, get me a new one or something. The size of an ostrich cracked me up.
Literally just bringing in like the same girl to try and get that photo, and just not expecting like that she'd grown up at all.
Yeah,
that was a great little part that they threw in.
That was one of my like laugh out loud parts of the moment or of the movie.
That was so good.
Yeah. Did you have any honorable mentions or?
All right, I had one, and it's when Vasily just goes, I want to make a speech at my father's funeral, and Steve Buscemi. And I don't know if this was improv or not, but just thinking about a Russian leader just going, and I want to fuck Grace Kelly, who just got me. I don't know.
That was it. That was Death of Stalin and Jojo Rabbit.
Yep.
So definitely, if you're still listening, give us the feedback. We want to know, did you like the movies that we talked about? In terms of that subject matter, should we just stick to comedies? Should we keep them as long as we're doing? Let us know. until then, we're going to see if we can watch a lot of Freaks and Geeks. If not, we'll sneak another movie in there. It's more manageable.
We'll do our best.
So we'll see what we have for you. Hopefully Freaks and Geeks. If not, the next week. So until then, I'm Kevin.
I'm Winnie.
We'll see you at the next episode.
Gesundheit.